API security pipeline, how to create your first rule group and enforce it, creating your first rule within a rule group, and types of assertion within a rule. By default, you get a handy list API rule groups pre-populated. To enforce any rule group, you can click on this three-dot menu and click on enforce. Once you click on enforce, you can see if you go to the pipeline, you get to see all the rule groups that are currently applied to your runtime traffic, and this one is enforced, so it gets checked all the time, and there are 8 security rules within this rule group. All of this combined make your security pipeline. These are the list of checks that each API call goes through, and it will either do an action or set you an alert based on what you have configured. Now that we have understood the concept of API pipeline, let's create our first custom rule group. All your custom created rule groups appear on this left hand side tab. Let's take a look at types of rule groups first. In order to create a rule group, click on this plus icon. First, you get to name a rule group along with its description. This is the precondition I mentioned in the previous video, which has to be evaluated before checking any rule within this rule group. So let's take a look at plus. I want to create a policy for all the account status. Now account status is, for me, it's inside the header. So account status equals inactive. So this rule group is only applicable for all API calls which come with a header called account status and it has inactive as a value. I can set up a default action in case none of the rules inside the rule groups have any action. I can just set one default action here for this entire group. In my case, I can send an email. So every time there's a trigger that happens in this rule group, I get an email alert here as well. Now that we have created our first rule group, let's add a rule inside it by clicking on add rule. After adding a rule, you can give a name and a description to your rule. There are multiple assertions type here like field, JSON, GraphQL, XML, IP filtering, VPN filtering, compliance, and rate limiting. You can set up specific field to check as well. Here I have selected account status to be inactive and received amount to be more than 100,000 to flag this as an incident. So for this rule called GraphQL SQL injection attack, it checks for fields in a GraphQL request body for different regex pattern for injection attacks. There's also an assertion type for GraphQL for query count 3 and mutation count to be 3. You can also have IP based validation list and a deny list. You just have to select the VPN filtering option, and from this registry ID you can select the table. The table can be created by accessing registry module and creating your own table which would have the list of IPs that you want to deny. Once you save that table in the registry, you simply has to mention the table here. You can mention what is the value you want to do and whether it's a string or an array. There's also a rate limiting assertion which lets you define the limit, window size, and status code to rate limit your API calls. Similarly, you can also go to compliance. Compliance is nothing but you can select whether a header or any part of the API request or response is compliant with the design or not. And this you can flag based on your priority and do relevant action. Maybe I want to send an email to respective team mentioning that there has been API traffic on this API which is non-compliant to the design, so that they can take a look at the design and update it accordingly. Next, you have to select the priority, which defines in the system what is the level of security associated with this violation. And lastly, the most important part as action, where you can create an alert on Slack, Microsoft Team, and email. You can set it as an incident in your API security logs, which are visible on this side of the module. You can do a service callout, which is basically an API call where you can put your API details in as headers, form parameters, and even payload. And lastly, you can execute a API workflow from the drop down. These are the active workflows in the system. I can select any of these workflows and trigger based on which environment it is deployed on. Like this, you can use multiple conditions to check and tag a priority and take relevant actions to it.